The sun burned low over the horizon, painting the sky in crimson fire as the desert winds picked up. Dust rolled in thick waves across the Wild West plains, carrying with it a warning. A sandstorm was coming, one so fierce it could bury trails, choke lungs, and swallow a person whole. Maria, a young mother of Apache descent, clutched her daughter Alina's tiny hand as they struggled across the barren land. They had been walking since dawn, searching desperately for water. Their tribe had been scattered, their men gone to war, and Maria was left alone with her child. Her daughter coughed, her throat dry, her small eyes blinking against the grit. Maria tried to shield her with her shawl, but the storm was growing, rising like a monster from the desert floor. "Hold on, my child," Maria whispered, pulling Elena close. "We will survive this. We must."
But inside, she feared the truth. They wouldn't. That's when fate stepped in.
Out of the shimmering haze rode a stranger. A man on horseback, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low against the wind. His horse reared as sand whipped across its flanks, but the rider held steady. He spotted the woman and child stumbling, almost vanishing in the storm, and without hesitation, he galloped toward them.
"Ma'am," he shouted over the roar of the wind, "give me the child."
Maria froze. She had never trusted outsiders, especially not cowboys who often brought nothing but trouble to her people. But her daughter's body went limp in her arms, and desperation silenced her fear.
With trembling hands, she lifted Elena toward him.
The cowboy swung down, cradling the girl against his chest. His coat wrapped around her small frame as he guided Maria onto his horse. "Hold on tight," he ordered. Then, with a firm grip on the reins, he rode straight into the storm. The sand whipped their faces raw. Visibility was nearly gone, yet somehow, the cowboy guided them toward higher ground, where a cluster of rocks offered shelter. He pressed Elena to his chest, shielding her with his body as the storm howled around them. Maria wept silently, watching this stranger, this brave man, risking his life for a child he didn't know. Hours seemed to pass, but eventually, the storm broke. The world was quiet again, the desert floor dusted in golden silence. Elena stirred in his arms, coughing, but alive.
"She'll be fine," the cowboy said gently, handing her back to her mother, a tough little one. Maria's lips trembled. Why would you do this? You don't even know us."
The cowboy looked at her with eyes that carried both weariness and warmth. "Ma'am, out here, we either save each other, or we perish alone. My mama raised me to choose the first." Maria had never seen compassion like this, not from the men of her tribe, not from the settlers who eyed her with suspicion. And now, this stranger had not only saved her daughter's life but had given her something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. Weeks later, Maria and Elena found refuge in a small town. The cowboy, whose name she learned was Daniel, helped them settle near a spring, where they built a modest home. He brought food when he could, taught Elena to ride a pony, and always kept a respectful distance. But compassion has a way of planting seeds. Maria realized kindness was not weakness but strength, the kind that could turn strangers into family. For the first time, she felt the world could be a gentler place, not because it had changed, but because people like Daniel chose to be brave enough to care. One evening, as the sun dipped again into the horizon and painted the sky with fire, Maria stood at her door and watched Daniel playing with Elena in the water trough, both laughing like father and daughter. Her heart ached, but not with sorrow. It was gratitude. She whispered to herself, "He saved her life, but he also saved mine." Sometimes the fiercest storms reveal the truest hearts. In a land where survival often meant looking out only for yourself, one man's compassion proved that humanity still lived in the Wild West. And that simple act of selflessness became the beginning of a new story, one of trust, love, and the kind of hope that can outlast even the wildest storm. The desert sun was merciless that day, blazing down on the Wild West plains like a furnace. The earth cracked beneath every step, the wind carried dust that stung the eyes, and the silence of the land seemed to whisper danger. But Maria had no choice. With her little daughter Elena beside her, she walked on. Maria was Apache by birth, a woman whose life had been shaped by hardship. The raids, the hunger, the endless wars between settlers and her people had stolen nearly everything from her. But she still had Elena. And for her daughter, she would face the cruelest desert, even if it meant her own end. That morning, they had set out in search of water. By midday, Maria felt the first tremors in the air, the kind every desert dweller feared. The horizon blurred, the winds grew harsh, and the scent of dust filled the sky. A sandstorm was coming, fast and violent. Maria tried to quicken her pace, pulling Elena along, but the child was small and weak. Her little legs could not match the fury of the storm behind them. Soon the wind began to howl, carrying grit that bit into their skin.
Elena coughed, her voice hoarse. "Mama, I can't breathe."
Maria dropped to her knees, wrapping her shawl around her child. "Stay close, my heart. Just a little longer. We will survive."
But deep inside, she feared they would not. That was when salvation appeared.
Through the storm's haze, a rider emerged, tall on horseback, his figure like a shadow carved against the desert. His horse struggled, its mane whipped by the wind, but the man pushed forward with steady determination.
Maria blinked through the sand. Was it real, or a trick of the storm? Then his voice cut through the roar. "Ma'am, give me the child."
Maria's instincts screamed at her to protect Elena. Outsiders had only ever brought her suffering. But her daughter's body grew limp in her arms, her breathing faint. She had no time for fear.
With trembling hands, Maria lifted Elena toward the stranger.
The cowboy swung down from his horse. His movements were swift, practiced, as if danger was an old companion. He caught the girl in his arms and wrapped her in his weathered coat. "She'll be safe," he shouted, his voice firm but kind. "Now, up on the horse. Hurry." Maria hesitated only a second, then obeyed. The man lifted her onto the saddle, then mounted behind her, holding Elena between them. With a sharp tug on the reins, he steered the horse straight into the storm. The desert howled around them. Sand cut at their skin like knives. Maria clung to her daughter, and behind her, she felt the solid strength of the cowboy's arm guiding them. He leaned low, shielding the child from the storm with his body. Every second felt like an eternity, but finally, he spotted what he had been searching for, a cluster of boulders rising from the desert floor. He steered the horse into their shelter, dismounted, and carried the girl into the hollow between the rocks.
There, for the first time in hours, they could breathe.
The cowboy laid Elena down gently, checking her pulse, brushing dust from her face. He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and lifted it to her lips. Slowly, the child sipped, her eyes fluttering open. Maria fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "She's alive, oh, thank the spirits, she's alive."
The cowboy gave her a small nod, his voice steady. "She's a strong little one. She'll pull through."
Maria looked at him then, really looked. His face was weathered by sun and hardship, his eyes a deep gray touched with weariness. Yet in those eyes burned something rare in her world, compassion.
"Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk your life, for us?"
He took a breath, glancing out at the dying storm. "Because out here, ma'am, we either save each other, or we perish alone. My mama taught me that. And I ain't about to forget it."
Maria's heart ached. She had never heard words like that from a man. Not from her tribe's warriors. Not from the settlers who only saw her as less than human. And yet here was a stranger, giving everything without asking for anything in return. When the storm finally passed, the cowboy led them to safety. He guided them to a small spring he knew of, where fresh water flowed clear and cool. There he let them rest, feeding Elena dried meat from his saddlebags, never once looking for thanks. Over the next days, he helped them find shelter near a quiet town. He taught Maria how to gather food from the land, how to build a fire in the harsh winds, how to care for her daughter's health. And though he could have ridden away, he kept returning, bringing supplies, sharing laughter with little Elena, and always tipping his hat politely before leaving again. Maria began to notice how Elena's eyes lit up when the cowboy came. She had lost her father young, yet somehow, in the way this man knelt to braid her hair or showed her how to ride a pony, she found the fatherly love she had never known. In Maria herself, she found something too. Not love, not yet. But hope. Hope that the world still had good men. Hope that compassion could exist even in a land as wild and unforgiving as the West. One evening, weeks later, Maria stood at the door of the small cabin she had built with her own hands. The sun was setting, casting the sky in red and gold. Before her, she saw the cowboy, Daniel, she now knew his name, laughing as he splashed water from a trough at Elena. The child squealed with delight. Water dripping from her dark hair, her laughter ringing across the land. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Not of sadness this time, but of gratitude. She whispered softly to herself, "He saved her life, but he also saved mine." In the Wild West, where survival often meant turning cold, one man's act of compassion had changed everything. He had braved the storm not for reward, not for recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And for Maria, who had never known kindness beyond her own blood, that moment became the turning point of her life. Sometimes the fiercest storms do not destroy us. Sometimes, they bring us the people we were meant to find.